Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. On May 14th, evil slithered into Western New York and caused a pain and destruction that slapped our community into a state of shock, anger, and dazed disbelief. The devastation caused by the hatred and thoughtless behavior at that Tops Market can never really be repaired. Those victims can't be returned to their families. The horrific memories of that day will never fade for the people exposed to that senseless violence. And make no mistake, murder is the one unforgivable act on this earth, because the victims of that act, the only ones that can forgive, they're no longer here. But out of destruction, well, let me go back a little. I had a very wise and respected teacher at good old Public School 21 here in Buffalo, Mrs. Valenti, my 8th grade science teacher. She taught us that nature, or God, or whatever you want to call it, had built into our grand earth a balance when all seems dark, when a storm blows through and wreaks havoc. It's followed by a period of healing. The flowers bloom, the air is a little bit better, things grow back with time. That's the system. And after that horrific day in May, our community, the city of good neighbors, this Queen City has come together in love and respect, support and solidarity to aid and heal as best as we can those affected by that invasion of evil. Look, life is a learning process. It never stops. We'll never eliminate evil in this world. It's been with us since man first walked the planet. But we can acknowledge it, we can fight it, we can try to minimize the hatred and the division and the bias that contributes to it. And in the end, we can and we should join together as much as possible and shake hands and smile and understand that we're all created equal and we deserve to be treated that way. And now, I'd like to introduce and welcome to the Big Picture Pastor Andre Clark from the New Direction Christian Fellowship and Pastor Jeremiah Smith from Parkside Lutheran. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
This is going to be an interesting conversation because the events that we've been going through lately are both traumatic and, in a way, they brought the community together. It's been horrific for the people involved in that Tops shooting, and the outpouring from the community to come together and help. For a while, it was extreme. It's trailed off a little bit. Andre, you've experienced and taken part in helping the people who were affected in that shooting. Tell us a little bit about the experience.
First, thank you for having us. And my aunt was one of the victims. Pearl Young, 77 years old, was one of the victims of that Tops shooting. So we felt the need to at least go out there and feed the community because the store was closed at least once from a local church. But I got in touch with so many different brothers in Christ, Turf Foundation, the Chapel, Friendship Baptist, Zion Baptist, so many different churches, True Bethel, Bishop Pridgeon. And we rallied together, and we've been raising funds to feed every day. We've fed over 13,000 dinners. But what we're noticing is that it's almost like compassion fatigue. It's not on the news. When we first there, you couldn't find a place to park. It was hundreds of people there every day to the end of the night. Now, it's slowed down a lot. I don't know whether or not it's the neighborhood, as far as the people in the neighborhood, or it's not as many people coming because of the shock value.
Yeah, the attention that was garnered from this whole thing, obviously that got people's blood boiling, and
yes.
Everything came to a head, and the president coming and the attention. People react, and the community comes together and things like that. In Buffalo, is filled with people of compassion. It is a city of good neighbors. But once the attention dies down, once the act is in the past, then people tend to go in their own direction and have their own lives to live, and things dissipate a little bit. Jeremiah, you're not in that particular section of the town, but you guys helped. And from your point of view, how is this ongoing?
Well, particularly for congregations that have historically been white, we got white folk work to do. So we can't just drop this issue. We have to address, why was this ever a food desert in the first place? We need to be looking internally, what stigmas, what discrimination is internal to us that we need to be addressing. So we're trying to do some of that work, and then we also have to ask, why don't we already have authentic relationships with folks who live in that part of the city? Why does it take a horrific tragedy? So some of our work is internal and trying to address some of the systemic issues.
Now, that evil person that came into town, he was filled with hatred. He came in, he's not from the area. I don't think he's reflective of the area. I don't think he's reflective of anything other than, you know, a horrific mind that was polluted with hatred. But there's a division that does exist. We're told every day by the media and by political leaders that there's a division, and that there's racism, and there's a lot of things in this society that are really bad. The message is very common, and I'm just not sure myself whether the message that we hear so often is reflective of what is actually there. I don't see it myself. I mean, I'm not aware of the division and the racism and the horrific things that we hear about all the time, because that's not my life. I don't practice that. You know, from the time I was raised, that's not me. But then again, I talk to other people and they say, oh yeah, that, you know, I see that all the time. In your experience, is it as bad as the message?
I was in a group of pastors, and this is what I shared. My father grew up in Alabama. He experienced dogs, hoses, you know, the whole 9 yards, in the heat of civil rights movement. Moving to Buffalo, he taught me something, that in Buffalo and in the North, it's not open. In the South, they'll call you the N-word, slangs and different things of that nature with no problem. But up north, they'll shake your hand. They'll sit at the restaurant, but yet there's still evil in the heart. I think what ends up happening is we have not even seen the level of hatred, and these acts actually stir some people up. When men in particular look at things that may have a sexual content, it arouses them. Well, if we're going to be honest, I believe that this act from this young man, which was videotaped, has aroused some people. There's hatred there. He didn't get this. He's 18. He did not learn this type of hatred on his own. And that's something that we have to not ignore. And what we have to do in sessions like this is that what I need Parkside and so forth is that they actually address it. Hatred never eradicates hatred. Love does. And so at this time, we have to show more love and not as much hate. And so I'm sitting here with my white brother in Christ, and we're going to embrace each other and now build relationship so that we can deal with it. So when he's at the water cooler and someone says something negative or racist, he's going to say, no, we don't do that here. And I think that's what's going to really bring that down.
So it's easy to call out the overt, but are we calling out the covert?
Right.
So one example, I live in the town of Tonawanda. 3 years ago, I bought my home. It has gained $75,000 in value in 3 years. Do we think the homes around Jefferson Avenue have gone up $75,000?
No.
And why are those folks there? Because banks would only give loans to folks to live in those areas. And that's not ancient history. Was it just in 2013 that Evans got in trouble for this?
Yes.
So this stuff is still ongoing. So Phil, you're talking about racism of hateful comments, but let's talk about the systems that are still being practiced. And we know that generational wealth often is handed down through property. So if your home's not going up, now the next generation is hurt. That's racism. So that's some of the stuff we also need to be talking about.
We can go to the same courthouse and do the same crime and get 2 different sentences. There's a system that is set up against people of color, black and brown. It's hard for some people to admit, but I've witnessed it. I've been a part of that. And those are some of the things that must be addressed because that is the covert, that is the underlining things. So no, I'm not gonna walk up to you and say, hey boy, or N-word or anything like that, but I already have a system in place. And that's really the reason why a lot of people don't wanna have the conversation because they benefit from
Right.
the system.
Right. And that's part of the problem. There's a lot of moving parts here. I just don't know what the answer is, and I don't think there is any simple answer, but that needs to be explored. You know, we're all the same underneath. We all have feelings, and we all have the love of our families and our friends. It just needs to be understood, and we just need to be able to shake hands and smile at each other and say, look, we're no different. I don't know how we get to that point.
So I think this is as a place where churches have a unique role. We need to speak truth and proclaim hope. So we need to call a thing what it is and call out racism, both the covert and the subvert, but we also then need to proclaim the hope that there will be a day that we will get to the place where there can be unity, but for now we have to acknowledge that, well, underneath we might be all the same. Our experiences are not currently the same because of the way the world sees us and because of the way the systems treat us.
You know, I like to go to the base of some of the problems, and one of the things that is a pet peeve of mine is in the last generation or more, the family structure has been affected. The family structure has been attacked, if you will. The father figure has been kind of minimized, and a lot of, and especially in the minority communities, the father figure has been eliminated to a great extent. There's the out-of-wedlock birth rate has skyrocketed, and there's no father figure to maybe give a role model to the younger generation, and that leads to gang members and bad behavior and a breakdown of morals. And it's not just in one community. I mean, it has to be addressed when you're growing up. I mean, in the Catholic Church, if the young people who are not educated to go to like a Catholic school and be brought up in the religion has led to a decline in the people that are following the faith. And so the Catholic Church is in decline because they're not bringing people into the church like they used to. It starts with the youth, okay? And if the youth are not brought up in the proper way, then as adults and young adults and as they mature, it's reflective in the society.
You go first.
Yeah, okay.
You can handle that, but I want to go back just a moment when you said about the fathers. I want to talk about the media and fathers. Now, I looked this up. A lot of times people want to believe that there are more fatherless families in the black community based upon media. But if you look at the facts, that's not true.
Okay.
It's actually not true. The problem is what the media, we believe what the media tells us. And we're the butt of the jokes, we're the butt of TV, movies, and everything else, that the black father is absent. fathers are absent in every demographic, including the white family. The problem is what is shown. And so people actually believe what they've seen. What I would like to see from the media is to actually put facts on the bottom of the screen. This is where we have, I couldn't write a paper and not cite it, but you can cite whatever you want on media and we believe it. And so what has happened is the value, how I look at my blackness is now devalued because of what we continue to see. We are not seeing the value that black men and women have in our communities. And I think that we have to be very careful of what is portrayed.
So this is where I might give an answer that surprises you. I'm less concerned with the traditional family. Psychology has shown that if there are adults who love a child, is it a man, is it a woman, is it a grandparent, is there an adult figure, multiple adult figures that love that child, matters more than if it's a traditional family structure. So that's what I'm concerned about. How do we cultivate a village, communities that care for children? And I think it's an easy scapegoat for churches to say, well, it's because the families are falling apart. No, churches are falling apart because they have failed to authentically live out the faith of Jesus. So if churches are struggling, then they should look inward rather than pointing a finger at the community. Woo! I'm fired up, Phil.
Okay, well, this is a good place to take a break because as soon as we get back, I'm going to get into that a little bit.
Amen.
Because I want to define what you just said.
All right.
And we're going to take a break, and this is where it really gets good. Folks, stay tuned. Welcome back. My guests are Pastor Andre Clark and Pastor Jeremiah Smith, and we were having a good discussion about society and religion and all things. Pastor, you said something about the church failing to do its job in terms of bringing people forward in their beliefs instead of the family bringing people forward in terms of morals. Explain exactly. Maybe I'm misquoting you.
No, I think that's fair. I hear too many churches say, it's those people's fault that they don't come here anymore. Well, why aren't you going to where the people are? If a church is focused on its mission, on speaking truth to power, on being prophetic, on following the way of love, on the way of Jesus, folks still need to hear that good news, and the churches that have that laser focus are still growing. So I just think it's too easy to blame the world instead of looking inward. And maybe that relates to the conversation about racism. It's easier to point the finger than to look inward and examine ourselves.
Well, let's go into that. For young people, just by their very nature, they're not going to do homework, they're not going to go to church, they're not going to go to school unless their family tells them, you got to do your homework, you got to go to school, you got to come to church with us. Okay, that's a family thing. By nature, young people are not disciplined and they're not going to do things that are good for them. So isn't it up to the family to get them started out in the right direction? Not the church, the family.
I think it's both. I really don't think you can separate the two, me personally. Yes, the family must bring in and be discipled. But the problem is that you have people that grew up in church, but they're sick of the same old, same old. So what ends up happening is it's not calling them powerfully. There's no, in my church, so you have a young African-American young man that is murdered on television, and we don't speak up about it. We don't do anything. We're not rallying. That doesn't call them powerfully. They're not ready. They're done with the song and the dance and the hoop and the holler. They want to see action. And so they're calling for the church to rise up and be the church. Jesus was just as political as he was religious.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing you say is the church has to be more engaging.
Relevant.
Okay.
It's got to be relevant.
That's
if we're not
key.
speaking to what's going on in people's lives, if they feel like this doesn't apply to anything I'm experiencing, then what are we doing?
But here's another key, is in your church, you necessarily don't have to speak up to that issue. When that mass shooting, does it really affect? Do we continue to do the same sermon series? For me, my church is blocks away from Tops. I've literally since there says, I gotta run to Tops and grab, oh, I can't even go right now. I have to live with that. I have to go back to that store when it opened, and I will go back to that store when it opened, even though my aunt was laying there at the entrance dead. I still have to go to that store. That store is a staple in that community. We should not have had a food desert there. But if we're gonna look at it, we have to do something. We can no longer just sit behind our stained glass windows and not do action and do this. We do a lot of talking, but we don't do a lot of action.
Well, you know, I went to the scene that day, and one of the first things that happened was a couple of people who I work with regularly came up to me and started a conversation. We talked about, obviously, the horrific events of the day, and then the conversation went to more broader topic of the neighborhood and the kids that were there, and we got into the conversation of the status of the neighborhood, the Tops being one of the only places where people could go, and the opportunity for the kids in the neighborhood to live a good life and have fulfilling jobs and careers and so on. And one of the things that was said to me, and I can't mention any names, but these people are fairly accomplished in the community. And one of the things that was said to me was to look around at all the children that were around on their bicycles and so on. And it was said that these children are being told every day that they have no opportunity. And the people I was talking to, who are accomplished and successful, they knew themselves that that's not true. That's right. That everybody in this world, everybody in this country, everybody in that neighborhood has an opportunity. They can do, basically, and they can go wherever they want, and they can accomplish things. But they're being told every day by the people who are teaching them, the people who are leading them, that it's hopeless, that they might as well give up because they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to do anything. And that's the message of leaders who remain in power because of an us versus them attitude. Now this is being told to me by successful members of the population. And they told me, we can't say that out loud because they'll step on us. We'll never be successful because they'll cut our legs off. We just have to keep our mouths shut. You know, we can't
ruffle feathers.
Yeah, ruffle feathers. And that's a sad thing because those young children there, you know, we had a black president, we've had black secretaries of state, Supreme Court justices. This is the land of opportunity. There may not be a perfect balance, but there is opportunity out there. And those kids need to know that. They need to be encouraged. Isn't that the message?
Certainly there's opportunity, but I think we fool ourselves if we think a child born on the east side or East Buffalo, whatever we're calling it now, has the same opportunity as a child born in Tonawanda.
That's the negative. Shouldn't we access the positive?
I told you we have to speak truth, and so we fool ourselves if we think there's the same opportunity, because there's not.
So you're telling people, you know, look, you're going to have a hard time.
I'm not. They're telling us, Phil. They're telling us.
But that's not the message that young kids should be told.
Young
kids should be told.
We still have to speak hope. Now, I'm not against speaking hope.
Right.
But we have to speak reality as well, because in the hope, we pray that they have enough fortitude and resilience and be resolute enough to push past everything that's come up against them. There is a system that's in place so that when we say go, he goes first. And after a couple of minutes, then I can start the race. We are always behind, but we have to keep pushing. There's a quick story of a little girl on a track. The mother was recording. They said go, and she lost her shoe. She had to go back, grab her shoe, put it on, and she took off running. She ended up running so fast, and she ended up becoming first place still. because she didn't give up. That's my message to every young person out there, that even though you might have some setbacks in the beginning, you have to keep going. But we're not going to be in delusional land to say that there isn't setbacks for those that are minorities.
You know, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left in the show, and that to me is probably the most important thing that could come out of the show, and that is positive, positive, positive. Because if you have the slightest negative message, people will grab onto that, because human nature is come up with an excuse. I see that every day. I see that all around me. If there's an excuse to be had, people will take the easy way out. They will go with the negative because that's the easy way. And it's so easy to make excuses why you cannot do something. It really is. And people will grab that. If you say
nothing.
You can do this, if you try hard enough, it may not be easy, but you can do this. You just have to try hard enough. And that's the message, isn't it?
We can have hope and know that it's possible and still speak truth, that there are obstacles. Yes, obstacles can be overcome, but we can't remove those obstacles until we name them. When families are looking to put their kids in school, where do they go? Are they looking for public schools in the city of Buffalo? No. How many white families look for the suburban schools? So let's name the obstacles and let's start to address them, having that hope that love will win the day. We can hold on to that ultimate message that love wins. Goodness is stronger than evil, but we still have to name the truth.
Well, okay. A wise man once said, you know, that if you aim high and miss, you're okay. If you aim low and hit, that's not acceptable.
We're aiming high. We want to tear out the roots of racism, but we got to name them as we tear them out.
Okay, well, anyway, that's all with the time we have in this very interesting show. I'm so glad that you could watch. I really thank my guests, Andre and Jeremiah. It's been a very interesting conversation. I have to get you guys back because this was good, and it'll be a good,
we'll be glad
good discussion.
To come.
Thanks again for watching The Big Picture, and stay tuned because this week, all week, we're delving into very important issues. We'll see you next time on The Big Picture.